It doesn't just have to be pesticides. An understanding of the ecology of agriculture is enormously important. This is an illustration of what is called the push and pull way of dealing with agriculture. It was developed by some colleagues at Rothamsted, and the idea is that you have a main crop which you want to harvest, you have a trap crop, and you have a crop that undermines the ability of pests to do it. So you attract away. And the illustration down the left-hand corner of the slide shows the sort of success you can actually achieve with it. So it doesn't just have to be pesticides, but I think we really do need to pose the question about how, I know you're having a discussion later on, I'm sorry I won't be present now, having a discussion about the use of pesticides a little later today. Next slide, please. Now, recent legislation in the European community has focused on a whole series of provisions. And actually, some of the pesticides that are actually being agricultural chemicals that will be eliminated by this legislation are properly, in my view, chosen because they present serious risks either to human health or to the environment. So I'm not saying it's all wrong. But where I have a big problem is on the basis of that legislation. Could I have the next slide, please? So, when you're a scientist, you've got to show you're marginally more erudite than your peers. So I went back to Paracelsus, born in 1493 and died in 1531. Paracelsus said, all substances are poisons. There is none which is not poison. The right dose differentiates poison from a remedy. A fundamental truth known since the 15th century. And yet, the legislation that was developed within the community in the last year has been based not on risk, but on hazard. And I believe that is fundamentally scientifically incorrect. It is absolutely important that we should assess risk, that we should assess hazard, and we should assess exposure. And I believe if we move to a hazard and a hazard-based assessment, we have real potential for significant scientific error in banning substances which shouldn't be banned. And I think that which we will need to address it. And the reason for the illustration of a cup of coffee, which is me being slightly silly, but I think it makes a point, is that coffee taken in large amounts is a carcinogen. It would be banned under a hazard-based criteria, and as Paracelsus said, it depends on your exposure, so how much you're taking. Finally, just staying with that, one of the areas that I worry about at the moment is the potential current legislation for dealing with particularly the triazoles, but other fungicides, on the basis that they have some sort of endocrine disruption function. I think that there is a real issue here because I don't believe the definition of endocrine disruption is really clearly defined from a scientific point of view. I'm not going to mention that debate, but I simply give it an example only that we've got to get science fundamentally into discussions of these sort of issues. I believe that science can make the advice. I think science should argue for using risk-based assessments rather than hazard-based because they make much more scientific sense. So finally, to complete my presentation to you today, I think that it is essential that policies, when developed, have a good scientific evidence base to be assessed. Imagine the reverse. Do we really want policy that is not based on sound scientific advice? Hard to imagine how that would be effective. And I would like to say that how delighted I was that President Barroso in his acceptance address to the European Parliament indicated his plans to have a European Chief Scientific Advisor. I think that that is enormously important and perceptive of the President. And I think that having a Chief Scientific Advisor with the responsibilities of looking at all stages of policy from its development to its implementation, which was the indication that he gave in his acceptance speech, has real potential for improving policy and particularly the way that scientific advice